Way to go. Keep it going. Good job, guys. All right, Paul. I see you. All right, John. Finish on. Coach Cole.
Great job, guys.
Hey there, it's Coach Curl here, and welcome to episode 211 of the Today's Leader podcast. Now, I want to start with a really big thank you to our listeners and supporters out there. We really do appreciate you listening in, and the new formats are bringing some growth back to the podcast. So thank you very much for sharing the podcast, liking the podcast. As you know, we're now bringing you 3 sessions a week, and there's a really clear focus on each one. We have Monday mentoring, of course, that happens on a Monday. And midweek, we have a lessons episode, a leadership lessons. And on Friday, we bring you a fantastic interview with a leader of today. And today is no exception. We bring you an amazing interview where we dive into the world of international money laundering, which is, you know, something a bit different for the show, but one that is absolutely fascinating. Aron Cranenburgh is our podcast guest. Now, Aron is a former AUSTRAC Senior Intelligence Analyst with 12 years experience in financial crime, economics and education. Now, while at AUSTRAC, intelligence provided by Aron led to several significant operational outcomes. So we're talking about arrests, convictions, asset forfeitures, civil penalties, and disruptions of the crime ring. So now Aron started his company AML Risk Solutions back in August 2019 in Melbourne. Now, the mission of the business is to help support and educate industry to better understand the risks and the financial crime risks that they face. And the business came about because while he was managing some of the financial crime programs for a leading wealth management firm, Aron was quick to observe that there was a considerable gap between the industry's understanding of their risks and their obligations and the expectations of the regulator, which was AUSTRAC. So Australia's anti-money laundering, AML, and counter-terrorism financing regulatory regime is complex, and the risks faced by businesses are broad and continually evolving. So our discussion takes a couple of twists and turns as Aron provides insight around the various regulatory environments and money laundering, the impacts on businesses to comply and understand the concept or the intention around the legislation. And upcoming changes in legislation may mean that your business now may have some obligations or some further obligations. So you won't want to miss this conversation. And along the way, Aron provides some valuable tips on leadership and growth mindset. So stay tuned as I welcome Aron Cranenburgh to the podcast.
The Coach Curl podcast is brought to you by Think Grow Business, the home of the Think Grow Business Mastermind. If you're serious about growing your business, get serious and join a mastermind group today. Find out more at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au.
Hey there, and welcome to the podcast. I have Aron Cranenburgh from AML Risk Solutions. How are you, Aron?
I'm very well, thank you, Tony.
So tell me the Aron Cranenburgh story.
It's not a very long story. I was a former specialist intelligence analyst at AUSTRAC. I worked primarily in the international intelligence exchange space. About a year ago, I left my intelligence career to run the financial crimes and anti-money laundering program for one of Australia's leading wealth management firms. I lasted about 2 weeks before I realised that there was a quite considerable gap between industry's understanding of their anti-money laundering risks and the expectations of the Australian government and the Australian community.
Okay.
So I quit my job.
Wow.
And it was a bit of a dive. And I started my first business in anti-money laundering risk solutions.
Yeah.
Like many bright-eyed, bushy-tailed youngsters, I thought, I saw a problem with the world and I thought, I'm going to go fix it.
And how's that been going for you?
Well, look, I've taken my fair share of punches, but I think I've come out on top so far.
Yeah.
It's all part of the journey, right?
Absolutely. So when you talk about the gap between the risk and expectations from the government, what did that look like? I know that you can't talk about some things today, but what did that look like? Was it the government had greater expectations, or was there less of an understanding around risk?
It's kind of interesting, actually, because businesses or certain businesses are required under the Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorism Financing Act to have a risk-based anti-money laundering regime.
Yeah.
Now, the way that most businesses have interpreted that is they've gotten very smart lawyers and very smart accountants to write what we in industry like to call checkbox compliance, where they just read the act for very black and white terms of what they're supposed to be doing, and then they just tick those boxes. Now, that's unfortunately missing the point of the regime. The point of the regime is, of course, to catch very intelligent career criminals who are trying to legitimize illicit activity. So rather than just, making a bare bones blanket checkbox compliance list of collect ID, check ID, they really should be hiring people with experience in, frontline fighting anti-money laundering, like former intelligence, former police. And a lot of businesses like Commonwealth Bank, for instance, or Westpac more recently, they've learnt that lesson the hard way. So I started this business to try to teach it to them in more of a carrot approach than a stick.
Yeah, okay. So it's interesting you talk about the black and white of legislation and then a checklist type scenario, because behind every little piece of legislation or regulation, to me, there's always an intention behind it. And then what we then put in behind that intention is some compliance activities to make sure that in most cases companies can provide some sort of process or procedure that delivers on the intention. So in this case, the checklist approach isn't necessarily delivering on the intention of the anti-laundering for terrorism funding legislation.
Yeah, perfect. You got it in one, Tony. And that's exactly the problem. You see, people and businesses, they get lost in the process and they start thinking very binarily about what their program says they should do, what their policy says they should do. And they forget the whole point is to catch criminals.
Leaders face the same issue each and every day. We've got to align people to what the vision is, what that intention is behind the legislation. So when you think about something like that from a leadership perspective, they're missing the vision. So they're working through the process, they're working through a plan, and then they're missing the vision of what that actually is. It's to catch the bad guys.
Exactly. I mean, and if any of you, I'm sure many of the listeners have been involved in professional development circles or have had mentors. I've had many myself. And one common theme I've sort of learnt from very successful people is that they're constantly reminding themselves of that vision. They're constantly reminding themselves of their mission as to why they started what they're doing in the first place.
Yeah.
And I think that why often gets lost when we're just going through the motions in life.
Yeah. Yeah, without a doubt. So what compelled you to start work in this area?
Well, when I was at AUSTRAC, I used to collect information under what was called the Section 49 or the Section 167 powers.
Can I just butt in, because for the listeners, what is AUSTRAC?
Oh, of course. So AUSTRAC is the Australian Transaction Reports and Analysis Centre. It's one of the 10 national intelligence community agencies.
Yeah.
So it works with the likes of the Australian Federal Police, the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission, ASIO, the Secret Intelligence Service. We work with all of them together as sort of one giant intelligence agency.
Excellent. Okay.
So AUSTRAC's contribution to the NIC, or the National Intelligence Community as we call it, is they provide specialist intelligence in the form of financial intelligence. Now, that doesn't just mean looking at numbers on a screen. What it means is deconstructing complex legal structures, understanding the people behind the money.
Yeah.
So one of the ways in which AUSTRAC can do that is through what's called the Section 49 or the Section 167 powers in the Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorism Financing Act. And they allow them to gather any information that a reporting industry like a bank holds on a customer for whatever reason, as long as there is a law enforcement purpose.
Yeah.
So when I was in my role at AUSTRAC, I used to do quite a lot of those types of collections. And one thing I noticed with a lot of banks and a lot of industries is that they took a very literal approach to the act. And so I thought if I could get into one of those industries, I might be able to help them out. I was unfortunately poorly mistaken, and I guess that's where failure is a great teacher, isn't it? So I guess when I went in, the expectations I had was that they wanted to learn this stuff. They wanted to see that they could do this stuff a lot easier and a lot cheaper. What I found was that these programs, a lot of people had vested a lot of time and money and spent a lot of money on external consultants, and they really didn't like hearing that the program needed to change entirely.
Yeah.
So
I can identify with that. Absolutely. I know when I first started my journey as a leadership coach, I sort of, because I love developing myself and I love reading and I love that growth aspect, so I thought everyone was the same. And like yourself, you saw a problem and you thought that was going to be a universal problem, that people shared your idea for the solution.
Exactly. And that's right. Yeah, spot on.
How'd you work through that?
Well, education. So I decided to accept a job, because first year of business, you're not making any money. So I was working odd jobs on the side. So I decided to take a position as manager of KYC at National Australia Bank. I won't go through the specifics, but I basically identified and worked with others and tried to collaborate with a number of very intelligent, very community-minded people across the bank to produce a comprehensive set of education for anti-money laundering for the financial crime operations division there.
Yeah.
And to a large degree, I think I succeeded. Once I sort of felt as though, I was sort of going a bit too fast for some of the people there. That sort of affected me quite a lot. And if I must admit, it was quite damaging to my ego that I couldn't just convince people. So I took some time to reflect and realize, I can't fix the world's problems. No one can fix the world's problems. No one person has all the answers. And I need to accept that sometimes I'm going to fail. So I felt that, I had succeeded in some things, I had failed in others, and it took a lot of self-reflection to sort of come to where I am now, which is accepting that, it's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes as long as you continue on the journey.
So how do you work with clients with what you do? What's the general principles?
Well, we offer a range of different services to clients, which is advertised on our website. The fundamental thing we do, though, is we help clients understand the risks and vulnerabilities of their investments being exploited by organised crime groups or hostile foreign actors. And when I say investments, I, of course, also mean a business's customers, who are, of course, their biggest investments. So in doing that, I try to sort of marry up. I'm a registered school teacher, so I try to marry up that experience with, also being a former intelligence analyst and a certified anti-money laundering specialist.
Wow. So it sounds such a fascinating field, but I guess how do you then, what's the message that you send out there into the community around your services? How do you create that identification of the problem for people to say, I need to talk to Aron?
Well, it's really quite simple. So I liked how you use that word create, and that's what it's about. Being creative when you're dealing with these things. Because when you're fighting against, organised criminals, I don't know, have you seen the show AUSTRAC?
No.
So it's basically, it's about this guy called Marty Bird, who's he's a really smart, financial advisor who he manipulates businesses and, opens casinos and does all kinds of crazy stuff to legitimize illicit funds.
Okay.
And that's the kind of person you're fighting against in this world. You know, it's a game of leapfrog. They're always coming up with more creative ways to hide their dirty money. And we've got to be coming up with creative ways to figure out what they're doing and catch them doing it. So you've got to be both critical and you've got to be creative. And I think that creative element is sort of missing. Businesses sort of, they go through their checkbox and say, well, we're doing what the legislation says, so therefore we're meeting it. And then they sort of forget the point is to catch these really creative criminals, right? So what we do is, you know, I'll go into a business, I'll identify the vulnerabilities, and then I will literally catch at least 1, 2, maybe 3 criminals who they're currently banking, and they almost always are banking a criminal.
Truly. Wow. It being outside the industry and being outside I suppose the subject, it's that's quite challenging to me to realise that it is so widespread.
Yeah, it's very pervasive in our society. There was a number of reports written on it. In fact, one really common vulnerability is Australia's significant investor visa scheme, for instance. Have you heard of that?
Vaguely.
Well, basically what it is if you've got over $500,000 to invest in Australia, we'll give you a permanent residency and we'll allow you to come here and put your money into our businesses. Now, a while ago in 2018, the UK actually abolished their version of this scheme because they couldn't mitigate the risks of money laundering in it. We didn't, even though the Productivity Commission recommended it back in 2016. So, you know, Australia, you know, in one way, in some ways, we're very vulnerable to money laundering because we legalise gambling, so we've got a lot of issues with junkets and people coming into this country with large sums of money that they're not declaring, and then washing through our casinos. And B, we don't really fully regulate all of those professional facilitators like lawyers, like accountants, like real estate agents, who are very, you know, they're the ones who are actually creating these fake business structures, and we don't regulate them at all here. So in many ways, we're a developed country, but we've got massive vulnerabilities in our system that are well known.
Wow. That's intriguing. I'm just blown away. So you've obviously got inspiration to work in this area through someone or somehow. How did that come about?
Well, I'm an avid reader. And if I was to give you a single source of why I went into this profession, I'd say a former naval intelligence analyst and author, Ian Fleming.
Okay.
So I'm a big fan of the James Bond novels. I'm a big fan of the James Bond movies. I'm not saying I'm in any way like James Bond.
Okay.
But, you know, Ian Fleming, he, through his creativity and his personal experience, he brought to life the world of intelligence in the form of books, in the form of films, and almost romanticized it. And, you know, his stories, while they resonated with me because I loved the concept, they also inspired me to seek out a career in intelligence, because what better career than to serve your country and protect your community through learning.
And catch the bad guys.
You catch the bad guys, that's it.
And every now and again sip on a dry martini. So
you just described my favorite drink.
Oh, that's incredible. And so let me talk leadership for just a quick, after all, we are called the Today's Leader podcast. And I could dive into your rabbit hole of espionage and intelligence any day of the week. But when we think about leaders and we think about who potentially is a great leader nowadays and who was a great leader in the past, what are some of the traits that you've seen? So someone like the Ian Flemings of the world, what are some of the traits that you've seen in great leaders, and are they the same traits to what we need today?
Well, probably the biggest trait I've seen, and the one I love the most, is that almost every leader I've met is open-minded. They've got this amazing growth mindset where they're always wanting to learn. They're always wanting to understand a different perspective. And to me, that's what humility means. I mean, in Australia, we've got sort of this thing like tall poppy syndrome. I'm sure you're aware of it. Where we're very critical of anyone who tries to have a go. And at the same time, we say we want you to have a go. We love the Aussie battler who's the underdog who goes for it.
As long as they stay a battler.
As long as they stay a battler, as soon as they become successful, we've got to cut them down a peg. And to me, it's great. The thing that makes us so good is that we are these little battlers with this tiny country of 25 million people who are kicking well above our weight. But we want to do that with everyone coming along for the journey, not just one person. So on one hand, it's amazing is that we've got this beautiful, amazing socialist country. And at the same time, when people do try to have a go, we cut them down, we criticize them, we call them names. It's pretty sad, but at the same time, I wouldn't change it because it's leaders, you've got to have that growth mindset, but you've also got to have tough skin. And I think that in a way, through this tall poppy syndrome, we're teaching our leaders to become some of the toughest skinned leaders in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd actually agree with you. I come from a retail background, vastly different from yours. And whenever I look at it, the leaders that we have in our retail industries, it is always about, I believe that they are vastly better than the ones that you would see in the United States. And I always put it down to, something that's really quite simple, but it's the average wage that we pay our retail workers here is probably twice or sometimes three times as high as what the retailers in America, for example, are paying there. So what we see is you've got greater resources available to leaders in other countries and other states in other countries, and the states being the main one that I'm thinking about. Whereas we've got to always be thinking about how do I do more with less. So I think that resilience mindset and that ability to look at that and not think of that as a downside, and how do we achieve the results, and how do we also look at our people as a much greater investment? Because if we're, say, investing $23 an hour as an average pay or an average wage rate, as opposed to an average pay maybe in some of the countries, some of the companies in America of $10 an hour, obviously we're valuing our people a little bit more too. So that resilience is absolutely critical with our leaders of today. I'm interested with the compliance mindset that you would see in managers in some of those companies that you work with. So obviously when they go through and they break down legislation, they do it black and white, they're coming up with like a compliance checklist of sorts. How do we resolve that? How do we change that? Because that's a management trait as opposed to what we would commonly call a leadership trait. They're just managing the process that's been given to them. This is what you have to comply with. Okay, we'll put a checklist in to show that we can comply, but they're missing the vision or the intention. So how do we change that?
Well, I probably quote my former boss and the current CEO of National Australia Bank, Ross McEwen. He actually said in the communication to staff that what he would like to see is for our people leaders, and they call them people leaders at NAB, which is wonderful, I think. Yeah. We need to start learning to wind back all these tools that we've put around the business to control staff rather than lead them. And I think that's what it is. I think it's about creating comfort in a role where you should be comfortable being uncomfortable. Yeah. We should expect more of our leaders. We should expect more of our managers, that if you are getting to that level, it's not because you're technically skilled, but because you're very good with people. You're very good at understanding people. You're very good at influencing people, and you're very good at achieving a vision. And I think we've somehow forgotten that in our society along the way. Yeah. We want to manage to the 3% that don't get it and make the wrong decisions or actively go out of their way to not do it. And we leave the 97% confused and hamstrung by legislation or bureaucracy or whatever it is. So, I agree with you. I think that every time the intention of every person, I'm sure, is to go out and do the best job that they possibly can. And sometimes we lose that because of, little Mary Lou or little Joe Bloggs who don't go out of their way to do the best possible job. So then we hamstring the ones that do want to do a great job, and then to look after the ones that don't. So, we got to look at our people in a different way. We've got to value our people. So, Aron, how do you deal with the inevitable troughs that you've obviously had along your journey? Sometimes not so well, if I'm being honest. Look, I think self-reflection, or in education we call it metacognition, which is the process of thinking about thinking, really helps with that.
Yeah.
So whenever I fail, I always sit back and I go, why did I fail? What did I do wrong? And what can I learn for the next time?
Yeah.
Because really that's what failure is. Failure is, mistakes. They're how we learn. So, you've got to look at them as lessons, and rather than regretting what you did, learn from what you did, build on it so that next time when it happens, you can succeed.
Excellent. Yeah. And because my next question was all about failure, but you've talked about failure quite openly, that relationship that you've had with failure. So I don't think I need to answer that. I asked that question because the thing with our troughs and our peaks and our challenges, we've always got to be looking at what is the message in there. And so many people, unfortunately, don't look at the message. They look to blame, whereas ultimately the only thing leaders with a growth mindset will be looking, what do I learn from this and how do I move on? So you mentioned the books that you read. So what are you currently reading in relation to your own personal development?
I've got it here. Please don't judge me. I'm a father of 2 children of my own and 2 lovely stepchildren.
Yeah.
So my attention's very split all the time. So at the moment I'm reading a book called When Business Meets Baby, which is a practical tools and tips for achieving balance.
Absolutely. Excellent. And what are you learning from that then, Aron? So
I'm learning that it's very hard.
Yeah, I take my hat off to anyone out there with young children, especially, and they're out there in the big wide world in their own business. I mean, my 2 wonderful kids are well into their late 20s now, so I think I started my business 7 years ago now, and they were both nowhere near the nappy stage. So any people with young children, good luck. So I wish them all the best. I take my hat off and I respect you all. So the book that's had the biggest impact, was that the Ian Fleming?
Yeah, so the specific book would be From Russia with Love, which was his 5th book.
Yeah.
I loved that book. It was great.
So what was it about that book specifically?
So in Russia with Love, basically James Bond, the main character, he's involved in sort of a massive espionage sort of circuit. He's tricked by Russian intelligence and sort of falls for a honey trap.
Yeah.
And he has to kind of get out of it. So it's the book in which, Bond, he's always in a terrible situation. He's always, failing and getting caught. But I think that one just captured it beautifully. Like this whole, he got embroiled in this big scandal. He didn't know who to trust. At one point he thought about, maybe he's working for the enemy. Maybe he's the bad guy. And I really resonated with that journey, that whole, who do we really serve? Can we ever truly trust our government, or can we ever truly trust a business? And at the end of the day, I think the message that was in that book, which really resonated with me, was that Bond trusts himself. He trusts his own instincts of what he knows is right and wrong. Yeah. And in truth, I think that all of us could learn from that. I think that all of us really, at the end of the day, we all have our own personal values, and then we have community values, and we need to respect those community values. We need to acknowledge and respect the values of others. At the same time, we also need to recognize that we have our own personal values, and that, they are no less right or wrong than anyone else's. And in fact, those personal values are what, if we really dig deep, that's where we find our why. That's where we find our mission, what we want to give to the world. Yeah. And that, I learned that from a fictional spy novel.
Wow, so awesome! It's and it's interesting. You were just talking about values. One of the books I'm reading at the moment is a book called The Edge by a gentleman called Michael Heppel, and he actually walks through a slightly different values process to what I've been used to, and it's really quite interesting because when I sit down with leaders, especially or businesses, and we walk through and create a values process. Most of the time we're looking at those aspirational values, the ones that we would like to think that we have, and then he breaks it down in a slightly different terminology, because he actually talks about the values that you currently have. And it's it sounds such a subtle little change, but what he gets at is the values that we believe that a lot of people have. People may believe that they're passionate, or that they're honest, or they've got integrity and all of those things, or that they're committed. And then their actual values is what they're doing day to day. That's their true value. So if you're sitting down day to day watching Netflix and then say, but I'm a passionate person, we're actually, it's inconsistent. It's not gelling. So it was a really interesting, because the values process that he talks about is, let's not even think about aspirational values as yet. Let's think about your current values. And that's based around behaviours. So you're absolutely right. And respect for community values, the world could do that with a little bit more of that at the moment, couldn't it? So, yeah. Hey, what's the vision for you moving forward, Aron?
To be honest, I don't know what the future's going to bring. I know what I want, and I'm very committed to that. And what I want to continue to serve my country. I want to continue to serve my community. And I want to, make us all as safe and prosperous as we can be as a society. And at the moment, my vehicle is AML Risk Solutions. One day that may change.
Okay. So just a question without notice. I mean, how do you feel about all these little conspiracy theories that pop up from time to time? So you're actually dealing in a world that's vastly different to what most people. You've actually got insight into the bad guys and the creativity that they show and the little tricks and that they use to maneuver around what we might call the system. And then you've got this whole group of conspiracy theorists that are out there trying to, in some ways, do the same, but say it's the system that's created. So how do you feel about things like conspiracy theories?
I think the term theory is what we should be focusing on, not conspiracy. I don't know what happens in the world. I know for a fact that, if you're thinking that government is super organised and they know everything they're doing, just take a look at the robo-debt crisis and you've got your evidence that that's not the case. Look, government is like any business, like any organisation with people in it. If you're going to choose between conspiracy and incompetence, I'd say incompetence is probably more the likening term. Not to say that government is incompetent. Our government is wonderful. But, I can't discount those theories, and I don't think anyone can, because, as soon as we say, no, definitely, there's no conspiracy theory, it's all fine, we're closing our minds to a possibility. And I don't like to close my minds to possibilities. I have delved into conspiracy theories. I've read a lot about them. Some of them, actually turned out to be true, like the secret government in South Korea. There actually was a secret government in South Korea.
Wow.
And a lot of corruption. And others, the jury's still out, right? So,
I guess it all comes through in at some point in time, whether the Illuminatis are running the world or the Rothschilds or the Earth is indeed flat. One day, I guess we're all going to find out, and there's going to be either a lot of people or a smaller amount of people with egg on their face saying, "Oh, geez." But an interesting way to look at it, that you look at things with an open mind. You don't necessarily just say no. So I think that curiosity, that ability for us to be able to look in and make our own decisions and judgments on what we see or what we're learning. So I think that that's important as well. So interesting. So Aron, out of everything that you've accomplished, and I can only imagine some of the stuff that you've been diving into and discovering in some of the roles, out of everything that you've accomplished over the last couple of years, what are you most proud of?
Probably the work I've done helping to disrupt and dismantle child exploitation networks. As a father, I personally believe that probably up there with some of the worst things you can do is harming children. especially for profit. So, for me, I've never been able to take my emotion out of that part of the job. Whenever I've seen or had a case in front of me that had any form of child exploitation involved in it, I poured all my energy into disrupting or dismantling that ring.
That's I once again, I can't even fathom that world and where people go down that particular rabbit hole. It just quite honestly, it's quite sickening, isn't it? So I think I would be very much like you. It'd be very hard to keep the emotion out of that, especially when you've got kids yourself and you know how dear and true they are to each and every one of us. So do you come across that sort of stuff often, or have you come across that sort of stuff often?
Fortunately not. AUSTRAC is on a task force with the Australian Federal Police.
Yeah.
I was in the international exchange environment, so I saw pretty much everything that had to come in and out of the country, and I worked on it. And I saw some pretty gruesome stuff that went through that task force. Fortunately, that wasn't my day-to-day. I only had to work on various ad hoc cases. I do feel quite proud and also quite appreciative of those of my colleagues who did decide to join that task force or who did work with that task force daily, because it is such an important topic, and it is something that, as a community, I think, particularly with the findings in the Westpac matter, we're realising we could be doing a lot more on to prevent.
And when you're talking about colleagues, obviously those colleagues would have huge a range of resilient skills and being able to be mentally tough to be able to look at what it is that they're prosecuting or chasing to get a positive outcome for the community. So full respect, absolutely. Aron, is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you, or is there, and this is your chance, jump on a soapbox, change the world.
Sure. So we talked a bit about the growth mindset, and it is something I've heard a lot in development circles. There is a thought I have around that, though. Yeah. So in my opinion, I believe that life, and this is just a belief, that life is a journey for us to experience knowledge and learning. So if that's true, then growth is required to experience knowledge. But, in many ways, aren't all animals born with all the innate knowledge they need to survive in any given moment? For instance, are we not born with the ability to feel pain and cry so that our parents may protect and feed us? In my personal philosophy, I believe that we are all perfect just the way we are, and we need to grow in life and learn in accordance with what we need. So it's about both accepting that you are already perfect and accepting that if you want to keep growing, you've got to be willing to open your mind to new ideas, because we're basically just weird trees, right? Yeah. And if a tree's not growing, it's dying.
And once again, it's very eye-opening. I think that understanding it, and what I'm going to equate that to is things like our marketing businesses, that are out there. So much of the marketing campaigns is designed to make us feel less than what we should be or could be. And if we switch that and actually acknowledge the fact that we are pretty good as we are, and that we are perfectly imperfect in so many ways. We've all got our own little traits and things that hold us back or stop us, or things that, may not look great on the outside, but we've all got, we're all individuals, we're all unique, and we're all perfectly who we're supposed to be. You're perfectly Aron, I'm perfectly Tony, and I think that's a nice little way. Does it mean that Tony can't get better? Absolutely. I'm going to try and get better and as you say, live my life the way, and grow and live my life the way that it should be, as I'm sure that you are. So that's an interesting perception. Thank you for that. So finally, how can people connect with you, Aron? And so most of your work is done with like larger financial institutes, I'm presuming.
Well, no, not necessarily. Anyone who performs a designated service under the Act. So there's about 15,000 odd businesses currently. And that would include small remitters, jewelers, gold traders. It's very broad.
Yeah.
when the tranche 2 of the Act comes in, they expect it'll be over 100,000 businesses, because then you'll have all your accountants, your lawyers, your real estate agents, your notary publics, all of those facilitators brought in.
Wow.
So look, it's very broad, my client base. If you do believe you need some help or you think you might fall under the Act, just get on our website, click the Inquire Now button and fill in a form and we'll get in touch.
So that web address again?
www.amlrisksolutions, all one word, .com.au.
Excellent. Aron, it's been a pleasure chatting with you today. You certainly opened my eyes on so many things. Appreciate your time today. I know that my listeners will have it as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. I appreciate it.
Join the group of people impacted by seriously simple stuff to get you unstuck. The first book by Tony Coach Curl. Available at Amazon, Tony's Simple Stuff provides the tool for people to master your life and aspirations. 20% of every book sold supports Carter's cause.
Well, I did say the conversation took some twists and turns, but overall, incredibly eye-opening. Aron works in a complex area, and it's certainly one that I now have a newfound awareness of. And one of the interesting perspectives that I took on this is that often we'll look at the world through our own eyes. And when we see things like changes in financial regulations, we often see an outcry from people with the proposed changes. Whether they see it as affecting their right for privacy or, security concerns or government spying, whatever those concerns are, we'll often see that. So understanding the intention behind the regulations may allow us to see the bigger picture, So instead of automatically seeing these things as an infringement on our privacy, on our rights, we may actually allow ourselves to see the role that this plays in bringing down international crime syndicates. And we all play a role in that because we've all adhering to the regulations. So maybe it just gives us that opportunity to get that balanced viewpoint around these changes instead of just always seeing them from our aspect. Now, Aron spoke about the leadership trait of growth mindset, but he also shared what many may see as a contradiction with that belief that we're perfect as we are. And while there is a concept that we are, because we are surviving today and we are perfectly ready to face the day for the majority of the population. My observation is just takes a little bit of a tweak to that. So I think we're born with the potential to be perfect, but many of us don't have the belief or the behaviours to actually realise it. So, and just as we are with a baby. We are born with no survival skills apart from our ability to cry. So we're not perfect to survive in the particular world as a baby. So we need that nurturing. We need that nurturing to grow, just as we continue to need nurturing to grow to be able to be perfect or face or cope or succeed tomorrow. So we live in the present, absolutely. But by living in the present, what we should be doing is allowing ourselves to grow for the future. So living in the present allows that growth for tomorrow. So slightly different take, but absolutely welcome Aron's thoughts, and I hope that whichever way you faced the interview and took on board I hope you faced it with an open mind, and I hope it gave you some increased awareness. I hope you enjoyed the interview. I certainly did, and I hope it gave you something to reflect upon, and that, as with everything, that I want you to be thinking about approaching it with a curious mind. In today's disruptive world, good leadership skills will always stand you in good stead. So if you're looking to build leadership skills, think about contacting our sponsors, Think and Grow Business and the Coach Curl Academy. Think and Grow Business is the home of the Think and Grow Business Mastermind, where we focus on personal, professional and business growth. Book your free discovery call, a 30-minute call at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au. And don't forget, the Coach Curl Academy has 78 programs in there at this moment in time to help you build a better you. Join for just $1 for the first month. So the academy that equips you and enhances mindset, leadership, and business. And that web address for them is thecoachcurlacademy.com. Don't forget, you are standing stronger, braver, and wiser. Don't ever forget the golden rule. Yes, you know what that is. Don't be an arsehole. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.